A Texas man facing multiple charges in the January 6th insurrection allegedly shot at sheriff's deputies who went to his home last week for a welfare check. That is according to a new court filing from an FBI agent. The agent says he called Nathan Donald Pelham last Wednesday and asked him to surrender in a few days. That night, Pelham's father called the sheriff's office and asked them to check on his son. When deputies arrived, they say Pelham fired several shots inside his home and then at them. One deputy said a bullet came close enough to him that he could hear the whistling sound as it hit a metal object that was near to him. Pelham is now facing an additional felony charge of being a felon in possession of a firearm. Let's bring in congressional investigations reporter for the Washington Post, Jackie Ellenmaner, who's taking a look at the status of all the investigations into the cases against
Jackie, this is our
Donald
Friday
Trump.
checkup. We can
Good
go
Lord.
top to bottom.
Starting with January 6th.
You know what's interesting, Jackie, though, before we start, it's interesting. I'm sure you saw the poll this week that was just released. And actually, voters scaled them on what they considered to be illegal activity. So interesting. Manhattan was at the bottom, but at the top was Georgia. Voters, for some reason, they get that. Maybe it was that tape recording, but most voters, a majority of voters, think that was illegal activity, and they're far more concerned about that than, say, what happened in Manhattan or even with the documents.
Yeah. And I think it's exactly for the reason that you just noted, Joe. The evidence is very clear-cut. Everyone has heard it. There also apparently are other recordings that the DA's office has obtained as evidence. We obviously had a little bit of a fracas when the lead grand jurist went out and did some interviews, and people were concerned that she might have sort of tainted some of the public opinion. But the court of public opinion does, at the end of the day, ultimately matter when it comes to all of these cases.
Jackie, let's turn to Special Counsel Jack Smith. And he's been gone a little quiet in recent weeks, but we know that there is still being work done at Maine Justice. Talk to us about the latest on these two cases. January 6th, yes, but also the Mar-a-Lago documents case, which you and I have talked before. There are many in Trump orbit who are the most anxious about that one and potential obstruction charges.
Yeah, well, we started the week with some news. Actually, it was really over the weekend where Trump's lead attorney, we reported, ultimately recused himself from the Mar-a-Lago documents case. This is Evan Corcoran, who actually appeared before the grand jury after a judge forced him to testify and said that he could not use crime fraud exception to shield himself from providing, he could not use attorney-client privilege because of the crime fraud exception, and needed to provide answers to questions to prosecutors about conversations he had had with his client, former President Trump, about some of the statements that he made to the Department of Justice, responses to the subpoenas, and conversations with Trump about where these classified documents lied throughout Mar-a-Lago. Then, in the middle of the week, we obviously saw some action going on in the Manhattan DA's office. Alvin Bragg ultimately lost a case against House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan. Mark Pomerantz, the former prosecutor who we've previously talked about, is going to have to testify before that Judiciary Committee. And then we have ended the week with Boris Epshteyn, another top Trump attorney, which bears, which I think should make me remind you all about the sort of infamous saying, make attorneys get attorneys. He appeared before the special counsel yesterday for an interview, which raised a lot of eyebrows with defense attorneys who noted that it's not often that targets in cases appear before grand juries, but rather try to negotiate these behind closed doors interviews, because they oftentimes take the fifth when they appear before the grand jury. And in these interviews, maybe sometimes try to obtain some sort of proffer or avoid getting charged. We know that Boris has been intimately involved with all Trump activities for years now, but specifically the Fulton DA's case, the Mar-a-Lago documents case, and January 6th. It's unclear what he told prosecutors yesterday in this closed-door interview, but that's certainly something we're going to be looking for today.
So, Jackie, obviously we've covered the indictment by the Manhattan DA and Manhattanites in a grand jury investigation indictment, ultimately. But there's two others, the investigation into the business practices of the Trump Organization and also the rape allegations by E. Jean Carroll, which is going to trial, even though Team Trump was trying very hard to delay that, making issues about the jury, the location, anything they could to push that off.
Yeah, I think that actually, Mika, could be the dark horse of all of these cases, at least in my conversations with some of Trump's lawyers who are specifically involved in the E.J. Carroll case. This is a concern for them. Trump has a lot of different concerns right now. I think the DA's case is at the bottom of that list, sort of mirroring voters' concerns. But we do know that right now Trump was supposed to appear in the E.J. Carroll case. That has been postponed temporarily. But this is someone with a myriad legal issues and criminal exposure on his plate right now.
Whew, the Washington Post, Jackie Alemany, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning. Great to see you.